Hi, I am continuing on with Alice Bailey's book, Esoteric Psychology. We're on the introductory section, certain questions and their answers. And we are answering the question of what is the definition of a soul? We're on the last definition and continuing on where we left off. Let's get right into it. It's not too long of a section. I just want to read it through and see what gels. Earlier on, the Tibetan, who is the individual or the energy that Alice Bailey channels this information from, they state, and I said this earlier on in the introduction video, there's a little bit of a blessing or a spelling words, right, inscribed into the words that says that for those who are earnest and those who are pure, those who have the intention to aspire to know the teachings of the ancient teachings, which is what Alice Bailey and that whole school of thought was for, that they would be able to receive the information, and that those who were, dabbling or not pure in heart would become tired by it, would become sleepy and become disinterested, right, or bored. So let's just see which camp we fall into, and just kind of marinate on the words and see what we make of them. I'll do a little bit of commentary, I guess, towards the end too, but just kind of want to read this one through. Alrighty, continuing where we left off. Soul, in quotes. Soul also is a word used to express the sum total of the psychic nature, the vital body, the emotional nature, and the mind stuff. But it is also more than that. Once the human stage is reached, it constitutes a spiritual entity, a conscious, psychical being, a son of God, possessing life, quality, and appearance. A unique manifestation in time and space of the three expressions of the soul as we have just outlined them. First, the soul of all the atoms, composing the tangible appearance. Second, the personal soul, or the subtle, coherent sum total, which we call the personality, composed of the subtle bodies, etheric or vital, astral or emotional, and the lower mental apparatus. These three vehicles humanity shares with the animal kingdom as regards its possession of vitality, sentiency, and potential mind, with the vegetable kingdom as regards vitality and sentiency, and with the mineral kingdoms as regards vitality and potential sentiency. The soul is also the spiritual being, or the union of life and quality. When there is the union of the three souls, so-called, we have a human being. Thus in man, you have the blending or fusion of life, quality, and appearance, or spirit, soul, and body, through the medium of a tangible form, which we are. In the process of differentiation, these various aspects have attracted attention, and the underlying synthesis has been overlooked or disregarded. I'll pause just to say that one sentence is very important. What we've learned to do as human beings is learn to differentiate ourselves, right? We've learned to categorize ourselves. We've learned to separate ourselves into groups and teams, and it's just this competitive us versus them. And even if it's not diabolical, it's just to identify ourselves, right? To become these unique individual beings, individuation and all of those things. Carl Jung and all that was a process of doing that, but it was also a trick or a trap, because the further we separate and segment ourselves down into the small parts, the less whole we become, right? And we need to understand through consciousness, unity consciousness, is that coming back to one, atonement, is that unity of remembering that as much as we are an individual, we are also everything. I'm part of this group, I'm part of that group. I have the potential within me to act a certain way at any given time, or to not act that way. I have everything, the seed of everything is within each person. So as much as we had the goal of differentiation in this lifetime, we also have this new goal in consciousness, which is at one-ment. So I'll read that sentence again. In the process of differentiation, these various aspects have attracted attention, and the underlying synthesis has been overlooked or disregarded. Yet all forms are differentiations of the soul, but that soul is one soul when viewed and considered spiritually. When studied from the form side, not but differentiation and separation can be seen. When studied from the consciousness or sentiency aspect, unity emerges. When the human stage is reached and self-awareness is blended with the sentiency of forms and with the tiny consciousness of the atom, some idea of a possible subjective unity begins dimly to dawn on the thinker's mind. When the stage of discipleship is reached, a man begins to see himself as a sentient part of a sentient whole and slowly reacts to the purpose and intent of that whole. He grasps that purpose little by little as he swings consciously into the rhythm of the sum total of which he is a part. When more advanced stages and more rarefied and refined forms are possible, the part is lost in the whole. The rhythm of the whole subjects the individual to a uniform participation in the synthetic purpose. But the realization of individual self-awareness persists and enriches the individual contribution, which is now intelligently and willingly offered, so that the form not only constitutes an aspect of the sum total, which has always and inevitably been the case, even when unrealized, but the conscious thinking entity knows the fact of the unity of consciousness and of the synthesis of life. So just to jump back really quickly, this is where the Tibetan specifies that there's no fear of getting lost in, Buddha's concept of, not having an identity and moving so you don't get swallowed up into the nothingness. As just as much as you become now conscious of your ability to be part of the whole and capable of the things that great men and women were capable of, just in that same manner, you just have to learn how to attune yourself to those frequencies and those capabilities within yourself, just like channeling is a skill and it's a practice, but you have to become first cognizant of that ability, and then you can practice it and act it out. And as it says, that's part of the evolution of humanity, is to learn to do this. But even when you do that, the realization of the individual self-awareness persists. You're still going to be aware of who you are and your identity and your uniqueness, and that individual is enriched, and your individual contribution to the whole becomes that much more strong and vital, because you're activated on both sides. Just as much as you know who you are to stand alone, you know just as much your power because of your source and your place in the whole, if that makes sense. Thus, we have three things to bear in mind as we read and study. First, the synthesis of life is spirit. The unity of consciousness is soul. And the integration of forms is body. These three always have been at one, but the human consciousness has not known it. It is the realization of these three factors and their integration into the technique of living. Technique, there's a technique of living, which is for man the objective of his entire evolutionary experience. Let us, talking necessarily in symbols, consider the universal soul, or the consciousness of the Logos, who brought our universe into being. We're talking about the solar system. Let us regard the deity as pervading the form of his solar system with life, and as being conscious of his work, of his project, and his goal. This solar system is an appearance, but God remains transcendent. So if a thought or an idea decided to individuate itself and become the 7 planets of the solar system, conscious, breathing, spinning bodies of energy, each with specific qualities that we learn through the study of astrology, it contains that same energy that manifested it into appearance and form, but that same energy that pervades it is also independent of it and transcends it. So it's not that one thing, God isn't the solar system and the universe, but it has the ability to express itself as that. We are not these human beings in these bodies, but we have the ability to express ourselves as that. So we're both. God remains transcendent. Within all forms, God is immanent, yet persists, aloof, and withdrawn. Just as a thinking, intelligent human being functions through his body, but dwells primarily in his mental consciousness or his emotional processes, so God dwells withdrawn in his mind nature. The world that he has created and pervaded with his life goes forward towards the goal for which he has created it. Within, however, the radius of his appearing form, greater activities are going forward. Varying states of consciousness and stages of awareness are to be seen. Just as with human beings, there's so many of us, and we're all at different stages of being and different levels of self-awareness, of compassion, of understanding of unity consciousness. There's so many different flavors and grades of it, and it's all part of a plan because there's an evolution happening, right? We used to be cavemen, right? So you can't say there's no evolution happening in consciousness. We can see it based on the level of understanding that we've had, the comprehension of our experience, and that life is about making things easier for ourselves. So we create the wheel, and we create technology, and we create airplanes, and we create all of these things to make life and experience a reflection of our levels of consciousness and the ways that we've been able to take it a step further to become more efficient and to become more free to enjoy life. I'll read that part again just because I don't know where I left off. Within, however, the radius of his appearing form, greater activities are going forward. Varying states of consciousness and stages of awareness are to be seen. Developing degrees of sentiency emerge. And even in the symbolism of the human form, we have such differing states of sentiency as are registered by the hair, by the internal organisms in the body, by the nervous system, by the brain, and by the entity we call the self, who registers emotion and thought. In the same way does the deity within the solar system express as wide a divergence of consciousness. There is a body consciousness, there is a sensory apparatus, registering reaction to the environment. There is a consciousness of moods, of quality, of mental reactions to a world of ideas. There is a higher consciousness of plan and of purpose. There is a consciousness of life. Again, we're talking about within the solar system. And as the great saying goes, as above, so below. Why would we not mirror after the great bodies in the cosmos? And if you want to take it to the macro, I don't believe in astrology or the planets, or I'm a flat earther. We have the 7 planets within us, our major organs, our major bodily functions, chakras, all of that stuff, all the many tiny organisms within the body that operate without our thinking of them are part of a better design that goes on intelligently and spins forward towards its unique purpose and serves its function so that we, the united being, can then go off and do our thing. It's like a split consciousness. I am the whole, but I'm also these equal parts that function within me. The body of a public system, society. That's why you call it the body, you know. I'll just continue on. There is a consciousness of life. It is interesting to note in connection with the deity that this sensory response to environment provides the entire basis for astrology and for the effect of the constellations upon the solar system and the interplanetary forces. We might sum it all up in relation to man as follows. Man's form nature reacts in its consciousness to the form nature of deity. The outer garment of the soul, physical, vital, and psychic, is part of the outer garment of God. Man's self-conscious soul is in rapport with the soul of all things. It is an integral part of the universal soul, and because of this, can become aware of the conscious purpose of deity, can intelligently cooperate with the will of God, and thus work with the plan of evolution. There is a plan of evolution. Man's spirit is one with the life of God and is within him, deep-seated in his soul, as his soul is seated within the body. This spirit will in some distant time put him in rapport with that aspect of God which is transcendent, and thus each son of God will eventually find his way to that center, withdrawn and abstracted, where God dwells beyond the confines of the solar system, and where we can dwell beyond the confines of our system. These are words which are formulated in an endeavor to convey an idea of order, of plan, of universal synthesis, of the integration and incorporation of the fragment in the whole, and of the part with the all. Just like the word synergy means, and Stephen Covey said, the sum of the whole is far greater than any of its individual parts. Any of us working independently with our own little efforts and our own narrow focus and our own lack of care and consideration for the other person and their unique contribution, you're only as strong as your biggest weakness, which is that blind spot of deeming yourself separate or special in the fact that you didn't get your gift in order to specifically unite and help the whole, help the story of evolution. We don't get hunches and intuition just so that we can get rich and famous. We get information and the ability to make a strong difference because we were meant to add that individual uniqueness to the whole. It's supposed to contribute back to the whole. Let us endeavor now to answer the second question. This is the final paragraph. Remembering as we proceed that it is not possible for us to do more than enter symbolically into the practical purposes of deity. As I write for simple aspirants, I cannot convey the truth until such time as their rapport with their own souls is complete, or more complete than is now the case. We've got to do our work. The effort, however, to grasp that which cannot be expressed in words produces a downpouring of the abstract mind or the intuition. So our efforts open up a channel where we can receive more. And so like the Tibetan enchantment into the teachings, our desire to learn opens up the doorway that we can then understand and that we can then take in and that we can then apply it and then become more whole, more at one with our full essence. So again, the effort to grasp that which cannot be expressed in words produces a downpouring of the abstract mind or the intuition. And this in its turn stimulates and develops the brain cells and produces a steady stabilization of the power to stand in spiritual being. Then it becomes possible to grasp the inexpressible and to live by its power. And that's the end of this little section. The next part is going to be into question 2, finally. In question 2, we're going to answer what are the origin, goal, purpose, and plan of the soul. Interesting stuff. I'm not going to read the great invocation because I'm not too sure what they're invoking. And again, like someone very kindly commented on my channel that I'm still using discernment as I read these teachings. Get a little swayed sometimes because certain people say, oh, well, these people were leaning up against that ladder. Return back to center. What ladder am I leaning upon? I'm not trying to usher in some other kind of force. I know what I'm learning. There's truth in these teachings and there's a lot of golden nuggets. So we're embracing that, but we're not going to just blindly, follow and feed into any old thing. We are learning what the tricksters of this realm have done to kind of embed competition and different things, hierarchies and separation and division to keep certain information suppressed. We're learning the things that they know so that we can become whole and not do the actions that were taken in order to keep people down. We are learning these information so that we can learn the truth about ourselves so that we may rise up. That's all I have for today. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you again in question 2. Take good care.